Hi, I'm Ray, and welcome to my GCD post to do with global understanding. And the topic today is the coronavirus pandemic. Describe the experience you had that links to global understanding. Well, what mostly links to global understanding is the globalization in the coronavirus pandemic. So first of all, globalization is usually thought of like as a good thing, but that is what kind of caused the pandemic because people were moving around the world. And it shows the privilege of being in a society and time period that does have the capacity to remain a good quality of life, but this is an outlier to that because sometimes it is not the perfect world, and so there are times where you can't leave the house or you can't go to school because school is shut down, but I still think that I am privileged to be in this situation, as some people have it a lot worse than I do. Can you give more detail about the outcome of your action? Being under quarantine and keeping up with the news a lot gave me a larger outcome of keeping Bangkok safe and also made me conflicted about how I feel about the pandemic. This is because keeping up with the news online and both offline made me conflicted about which news source is true because sometimes some of the information contradicts each other, and so it doesn't really help me because sometimes one thing says this but the other says this, and so it is really hard to keep up with what is the right source of information and what is not. Please describe the process leading up to this experience to give some background as to why the experience is so significant. So, some backstory here is that I had to go to Japan for some family emergencies during the February break. And at that time, there was no announcement of the quarantine for people who came back from Japan yet. And this lack of knowledge caused me to not be able to leave the house for 14 days right after I came back from Japan, which caused me to not be able to go to school for 14 days. But then, after that, now we have a 4-week quarantine because the school is shut down, and so in total, that means I have a 6-week quarantine. Connect. How does this experience connect to your learning in other instances or places? This connects to the learning about pathogens in science last year in year 9, as many people believe in things that are wrong in this time because people are panicking and it's kind of like mass hysteria. But people are believing things that are wrong that could have been learned in like fundamental middle school science. And so, me having that basic knowledge of pathogens, how they spread, what they are, and stuff, allows me to at least be somewhat educated in the pandemic and know at least what not to worry about and what to worry about. Can you connect this experience to another learning experience you had had? This experience connects to the 2011 floods in Thailand, as back then, many of the supplies needed for daily life were gone, and it was a large societal problem, which is similar to the mass outage due to the novel coronavirus and the hysteria around it. This relates to the economic aspect of the global understanding, as it showed me that I have the privilege to buy things if I needed, and it also showed me that if there's an outage, I can still buy things at the supermarket or places like the internet. And I think that that privilege that I have should be acknowledged because not everyone has it. And I think that I'm very fortunate to have that economic privilege. Have you read, watched, or participated in another event that links to this learning? Well, I have read many things about the novel coronavirus on the internet, videos, and I've also watched TV news. Due to this abundant information, I feel that people are overreacting to the novel coronavirus. But when some people overact, for example, panic buys, then the supply chain will not be able to keep up, causing others to also panic buy who did not overact before, and so this cycle of lack of supplies continues to happen. And so when this continues to happen, people who need the things just don't have it. I think that this is also part of the ethical factor of this problem because I think that I also have the privilege of being able to access lots of information to know that it's unethical to buy up all the toilet paper or the masks, and I also know that we don't need to do that. And so I think that my privilege of having information and knowledge about this allows me to avoid this ethical problem. Compare. Now that you have had this experience, how has it changed your thinking? In other words, what did you used to think and what did you think now? I used to think that things like mass hysteria and overreacting ends quickly, but now I think that the coronavirus social issue will not go away for a long time. I really thought that I didn't really have that much privilege at first, but then I acknowledged my privilege much more because I realized that I have the power to buy things if I need to, like food, but also have the knowledge to not overbuy or panic buy. I also think that this problem relates to politics as well, because I think I have the privilege of being able to be both Japanese and Thai, because then I get to see the perspectives from two different countries and two different governments. And so, for example, the Japanese government and the Thai government take things very differently in this pandemic, because in the Japanese government, what they do is, well, they test not that many people, and there are way too much on the stakes, such as the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. Explore. So now that you have had this experience that has changed your way of thinking, what other questions or ideas do you have that you might want to explore further? Here are some questions that I want to be able to explore. Will a pandemic wipe us off the earth like in TV shows and movies? If so, when? Are things going to get better in the long run or worse? Having had this experience, I think that we still don't know what's going to happen in the future. But I'm really curious to see how this pandemic will end and if this will go down in history as like a huge event or not. Well, the course of action that I will take from now on will be maintaining good hygiene throughout my life and evaluating news sources. This does not only apply to when a pandemic happens, but should also apply to everyday life from now on. New understanding. Things for you have changed as a result of this experience. How has this made you more self-aware? I think I'm more self-aware of how privileged I am for being able to have online lessons by some teachers, and also being able to have a good life without having to think of how this will affect my livelihood, or my income or anything. Global citizen. How do you think this experience has helped improve your understanding on a more global level? I think it let me understand how globally connected the world is, because usually I would only look at news from, let's say, Japan and Thailand, or at most Asia. But this has made me realize and look at the news from anywhere in the world, from Italy, the US, China, and so many places, and has made me widen the scope of what I look at as a whole. That is the end of my Global Understanding GCD post about the novel coronavirus, and hopefully the situation gets much better after the quarantine is done, and hopefully the world goes back to normal again. Thank you.